This month's Soul Matters theme has been liberating love. As I've said before, there are lots of things we can mean by the English word love. So in religious circles, we use sometimes the Greek word agape, or maybe the Hebrew word chesed. Christian apologist and author C.S. Lewis defined this sort of love as a selfless love that is passionately committed to the well-being of others. Given this definition of love, it makes sense that it would be liberating love. After all, you can't be passionately committed to the well-being of others and yet be okay with injustice and oppression. You can't be passionately committed to someone's well-being without also doing whatever you can to liberate them. Now, in naming this month's theme, Soul Matters could just as easily have referred to freedom as to liberation, but I think I know why they didn't. As most people use the word freedom, it's about freedom from or freedom to. In our hyper-individualistic society, that usually comes down to freedom from being told what to do and the freedom to do whatever we want, neither of which have anything to do with liberation. This is unfortunate because the true meaning of freedom is about the liberation of freedom with. After all, when linguists trace the word free back through Old English, Anglo-Saxon, and Germanic, they end up with the reconstructed Proto-Indo-European root pre, which means to love. The word friend comes from this same root. In other words, our concepts of freedom and friendship are actually consequences of ideas going back thousands of years about what it means to love and to be loved. This is freedom with, which isn't so much about any of us as individuals as it's about what we do and the choices we make in relationship with one another. It's about liberation through love. It's about liberating love, what Dr. King called a willingness to go to any lengths to restore community. For modern Universalists, this is what is meant by salvation. Not going to some afterlife in paradise, but seeking wholeness in this life by healing a bruised and broken world and building the beloved community through liberating love. I did say earlier that what modern Universalism means by salvation is about liberating love, and I suppose I should unpack that. Universalism emerged from the theological turmoil of early Christianity as the belief that after death, everyone would ultimately go to heaven. Rather than being a celestial reward for leading a good life, rather than gaining admission by believing the right things, rather than winning the cosmic lottery of God's grace, heaven was open to everyone, said the early Universalists, because anything else was incompatible with the idea of an all-knowing, all-powerful, and in particular, all-loving God. This lovely idea was unfortunately ruled a heresy during one of the early church councils, but like the Unitarian belief in the humanity of Jesus, it kept cropping up over the centuries. Universalism gained new steam during the Protestant Reformation when John Calvin promoted his dismal theology that each and every one of us is basically worthless. A few of us get into heaven regardless of how we've lived our lives, only we don't and won't and cannot know who or why, given the inscrutability of God's grace. And everyone else burns in hell forever, and there's nothing to be done about it. Now, maybe this appeals to people who are full of themselves, and conversely, people who have miserable opinions of themselves. But it doesn't match anything Jesus ever said in the Bible, and it certainly goes against any higher sense of justice. I mean, Isaac Newton was criticized for turning the world into a machine, but John Calvin's universe is only more cold and dead and pointless. And even God doesn't seem to have any choice in the matter. So the Universalists came back strong and instead offered an almost completely opposite vision. Rather than only an inscrutably elect few going to heaven, everyone goes to heaven because an infinite God's love is infinitely greater than mere humanity. Over the centuries, many denominations came to embrace some form of universalism. It's certainly more friendly to preach about a God who has infinite love than a God who needs to go to anger management. And as far as the Universalist denomination itself was concerned, it continued to be explicitly Christian through the mid-20th century. Then three things happened. First, there was a younger generation of Universalists at places like the Crane Theological School at Tufts University, which was founded as a Universalist college, notably with the patronage of Universalist P.T. Barnum. And those students sought a broader, more truly universal universalism that wasn't only for Christians. Second, the Universalist Church of America had twice applied for membership in the National Council of Churches and had twice been rejected. The second rejection came with an explanation that the Universalists were just too much like the Unitarians, who hadn't been Christian for over 100 years. Third, after decades of pussyfooting and then a whole lot of wrangling over words, the Universalists and the Unitarians did join to form the Unitarian Universalist Association. The Unitarians were largely humanist and outnumbered the Universalists. So over time, salvation was understood anew, not in terms of love that brings us to heaven after we die, but in terms of love that seeks heaven here on earth while we're still alive. The kingdom of heaven, as Jesus named it, the beloved community, as Dr. King named it. After all, the word salvation comes from the Latin root salvus, which means safe, sound, unharmed, unhurt, uninjured, well, healthy, whole. So rather than being about some afterlife in paradise, salvation can be about wholeness in this life. And that is something that we do together with liberating love to heal a bruised and broken world and build the beloved community. And for the record, this isn't some radically new understanding of salvation. Some of you will remember the Reverend David Hicks McPherson, who was Minister Emeritus at First UU in Richmond for many years, after retiring from an active half-century of founding and growing UU congregations. He was a fifth-generation Universalist and a graduate of Tufts just before the cohort that reshaped Universalism as a more universal religion. Dave often made the point that the idea of universal salvation was not primarily, and certainly not exclusively, about life after death. Rather, as he put it in his book, Reclaiming Universal Salvation, Universalism has the message, the gospel, the good news that the world is one, that there is but one human family of which we are all members. Universalism, Dave explained, proclaims that through the power of all-embracing love, humanity can learn to overcome all evil and will realize that earthly paradise for which we have longed. He went on to note that this good news has been proclaimed from the earliest years of American Universalism, both the 1790 Articles of Faith adopted in Philadelphia and the 1803 Profession of Faith adopted in New Hampshire declared that the end goal is the restoration of the whole human race to happiness. Given this, Dave identified the UUA's sixth principle, namely affirmation and promotion of the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, as a modern UU articulation of universal salvation. It was our 20th century way of talking about bringing the whole human race to happiness, to a commonwealth of love and justice. For that matter, the proposed 21st century revision of the UUA's bylaws says quite simply that the purpose of the Unitarian Universalist Association is to actively engage its members in the transformation of the world through liberating love. This is about a selfless love that is passionately committed to the well-being of others. This is about a freedom with and a willingness to go to any lengths to restore community. This is about healing a bruised and broken world and building the beloved community. This is about saving us all from hell on earth and instead working together to create heaven on earth. Universalists from Olympia Brown to Dave McPherson have long preached that this is entirely obtainable if we embrace liberating love. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each to reflect. Jeffrey will put each question on the screen as I ask it. I wonder when you have felt beloved and welcome. I wonder where you have experienced a selfless love. I wonder how you imagine the beloved community. I wonder what you understand by salvation in this life. For our activity and sharing today, we're engaging with a UU version of the spiritual practice known as Lectio Divina. I'll read a poem, and as you listen, pay attention for any word that sparkles for you, a word that you notice in particular, that attracts you in some way. After I've read and you've listened, then Pam will invite those who are willing to share which words sparkled for you and what it means to you. This poem is called To the People Who Have Mistaken Freedom for Liberation by the Reverend Julian Soto from their book, Spilling the Light, Meditations on Hope and Resilience, published by the UUA's Skinner House. Some of you are familiar with this poem, and that's okay. The thing about Lectio Divina is that different words can sparkle for you at different times because it's about you, not the poem. Jeffrey will put the words on the screen for those who prefer to see them at the same time that I'm reading them, or you may close your eyes. In any case, I invite you to listen and pay attention for any word that sparkles for you. To be free, you must embrace the breadth of your own existence without apology, even if they try to take it from you. You must know not that you can do whatever you want. You are not a kudzu vine eating entire hillsides for the purpose of feeding your own lush life. You must know instead that inside you are entire universes, milky blue, magenta, and gold, expanding. But to actually be free, you must know and you must fight for the entire universes inside of everyone else. Being free is not a license, but a promise. Have you ever found that when you say, get a new dog, you start seeing lots of people with the same type of dog? Or you get a new car, and you start seeing lots of that type of car on the road. Something similar often happens for me as I'm preparing for a service. Once I've decided that I'll preach on a certain topic, I start seeing headlines and articles and posts and memes on that same topic. For instance, here are a few that I saw on social media just during the last week. Jeffrey, would you put the first on the screen, please? This one says, if you think you love freedom, but you don't care if it applies to everyone, what you actually love is privilege. I haven't seen any attribution for these words, so I can't give credit to whoever wrote them. They do get to the point I was making earlier, though, that what is most often meant by the word freedom in our society is individualistic and self-centered. Next slide, please, Jeffrey. This one quotes author Toni Morrison. If you are free, you need to free someone else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This makes the point that in spite of how they're often understood, both freedom and power are supposed to be shared, not hoarded. It's why in liberal religion, we speak of freedom with and power with, because liberating love calls us to be passionately committed to the well-being of others. Next slide, please, Jeffrey. This one says, train yourself towards solidarity and not charity. You are no one's savior. You are a mutual partner in the pursuit of freedom. I believe this is from activist Brittany Packnett. I don't take her words to blithely dismiss the value of charity. Unhoused people still need shelter. Hungry people still need food. But to make the point that charity is only ever a short-term solution. To practice solidarity, to be a mutual partner in support of freedom, is to seek the long-term solution of liberation, dismantling structures of injustice and inequity so that nobody is unhoused or hungry in the first place. Now, I've also seen this attributed to the Indigenous Australian artist and activist Leela Watson. And in fact, there's another quote along the same lines that was developed by her Aboriginal rights group in Queensland. Next slide, please, Jeffrey. This says, if you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. This clearly makes the point that liberation is freedom with, which isn't about somebody charitably helping someone else. It's about acting on our interdependence in solidarity. Thank you, Jeffrey. You can stop sharing your screen. For me, all of these get to the point that we can't actually be free by ourselves. That freedom is not merely a right, but a responsibility. That we can only seek freedom together and by being in mutual relationship with one another. So let us embrace liberating love and build the beloved community together. May it be so.